I finally got round to watching Snow White, and it's taken me a little while because it only arrived on Disney Plus, I think today at the time of recording, maybe yesterday. I was looking forward to seeing it. Well, maybe that's not the right wording. I was curious to check it out, but not enough to pay to stream it or anything. It had been on Prime, I think, for a little while, but I just held off until it was on Disney Plus. And having now watched it, I can say that it's okay. I was very surprised to learn that it only has 1.8 out of 10 across 365,000 reviews and ratings on IMDb. That is a shockingly low rating. I knew it had not been very well received, but that's diabolical. That is horrendous. I have to say, I think it's an average film, which, sure, for a Disney live-action film, it shouldn't be average. It should be spectacular, according to Wikipedia, and I haven't fact-checked this, but apparently it had a budget of somewhere between $240 and $270 million. It doesn't necessarily feel like an amazing 21st century Disney live action. And I think the main problem I have is with the character writing for Snow White, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But in general, I don't think it's horrendous. I wouldn't watch it again, but I don't think it's as low as 1.8. That's pretty horrendous. It is a live-action version of Snow White. I only just realised, I don't know why I'd never realised this, but I've only just realised it's only called Snow White, and not Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I think that's quite interesting, because to me that suggests it's more about Snow White. Granted, the animated film is largely about Snow White, but it seems like it should be more about her and her emotions and her feelings. And the character is so bland. She has none of the qualities that the classic Snow White does. But I'll come back to the character in a moment. The film was, of course, released this year in 2025. It's directed by Marc Webb. It's written by Erin Cressida Wilson, of course, based on Disney's animated film, and also the story by Brothers Grimm. And we have a cast including Rachel Zegler as Snow White, Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen. We have decent performances. I don't mind either of those performances. I think Zegler and Gadot gave decent enough performances as those characters, but they were both so poorly written. The Evil Queen was not evil enough. She was very dull. She looked great. I love the costume. I have to say I quite like Snow White's costume as well. I don't mind it. But again, the character was just so boring. She was not unlikable, but she just didn't feel like Snow White. She was just missing that spark, that special something. The dwarfs, I really like. I think the characters are absolutely fine. They're not quite as wonderful and charming as the animated versions, but I think it's fair to judge this film on its own as much as possible. And let's say I've never seen the animated version, I would have thought, yeah, those characters are okay. I quite like them. And in general, I don't have a problem with how those characters were portrayed or their personalities. The story itself generally follows the basic concept. I won't go into too much detail. There are some differences, and I will not spoil any of those. For me, part of the curiosity was what's going to be different, and I won't go into any detail about that, but I don't think they made any significant changes. I don't think there was any change that I had a problem with or anything, so that's okay. The narrative is fine, but I feel like because Snow White didn't give me a strong emotional response, I think it's very easy to have a strong emotional connection with the classic character and the animated character, but because I never really felt for the live-action Snow White, I wasn't really as emotionally invested in her journey as I would like to have been, and that meant that the narrative itself wasn't as emotional and therefore wasn't as exciting or thrilling. It was fine. I think the narrative itself is well handled, but it's nothing amazing. Had I never seen the animated version or any other version of Snow White, I would have thought, yeah, it's a well-crafted story. It makes sense. It flows well. The pacing's fine. Judging it on its own, it's fine. Comparing it with the classic, the narrative's not too different. It's not too bad. I think the biggest issue I have is simply the character of Snow White and the character of the Evil Queen. They're just not very well written. They're very boring. They're not badly done. They're believable. The performances are fine. The costumes look good. The Evil Queen's costume could have been a bit better, but Snow White's I actually quite like. But the characters are just so flat that it's just not that interesting. Visually, it's actually quite stunning. I think it's quite impressive. And not all of the way through. There are times when it's fine, when it doesn't necessarily look big budget, but it looks okay. And there are certain moments where actually it does look fabulous. The music is okay. We have a couple of the classics. We have Hi ho, we have Whistle While You Work. There are a couple of songs missing that I think should have been there. I don't know if there's a reason why they didn't include some of Snow White's songs, or if they just decided not to. I have no idea. If they just made the conscious decision to not bother including them, I think that was a very bad decision. However, Snow White does sing a rather delightful song called Waiting on a Wish, which is not as great as I'm wishing, but I did like it. I did actually really like that song. The rest of the music, it's fine, but that one stood out to me as being pretty brilliant. So the music's okay. It's not as amazing as the classic soundtrack. Again, maybe we shouldn't compare it, maybe that's not fair, but at the same time, if Disney are going to do these remakes, and I'd like to think they're going to start slowing down with the live action remakes, but I have no reason to believe that, then a comparison is inevitable and it should be expected. But judging the soundtrack on its own, it's okay. So in general, I think Snow White is a perfectly fine film. I don't think it's anything amazing. I don't think it was necessary. I don't think it's one that's going to be very memorable. Obviously, the basic elements are memorable, but I don't think it's one that people will be, I could be wrong about this, but people will be watching over and over again. I don't think it's ever going to be many people's favourite. But at the same time, I didn't mind it. I didn't hate it. I thought there were some really good moments. Well, some moderately good moments. I don't think there was any single moment that made me go, wow, look at that. Or, isn't that amazing? Or, I'm really feeling something incredible right now. It was a very kind of mediocre emotional experience. And again, that's largely because of the characters of Snow White and the Evil Queen. I just don't think those characters were strong enough for this film. And that's not even comparing it with the classic animation. That's just judging it purely on its own. Those characters are quite mundane. But the rest of the characters, they're all fine. There's nothing spectacular about Snow White. I don't think it needed to exist. I think they could have put the time and effort and money into creating a brand new story. Because, and I could be wrong, but I don't think this will ever be anybody's favourite version of Snow White. Whereas maybe I can see somebody loving the live-action Cinderella more than the animation, possibly, I'm not sure, or some of the other live actions. Some of them offer a different but equally magical experience. That's not the case here. I'd be very surprised if anybody sits down and goes, I'm in the mood to watch Snow White, and they pick this one over the animation. But maybe there'll be somebody. There are millions of people watching this. Maybe somebody will prefer it, but certainly judging as well based on that IMDb rating of 1.8 out of 10, it's really shocking, actually. I really wasn't expecting it to be that low. I was expecting maybe 4.5, 5. For context, I'd give it maybe a 5.5, maybe a 6. A 5.5 comparing it with the animation, but a 6, maybe a 6.5 judging it purely on its own. Either way, I don't think it's fantastic. I don't think it needed to exist. I didn't mind spending the time watching it. There are some okay moments. Some of the music's good. Visually, it's not too bad in places. But ultimately, Snow White as an animated film is significantly better. And the 2025 film did not need to exist. If you like the story, check it out. It is watchable. I'd say it's more than watchable. But I'd say it's impossible to not compare it with the animation. And with that in mind, I feel like it just doesn't really serve a purpose. And it doesn't really need to exist. But nevertheless, it does exist. So if you're curious, check it out. I'm glad I waited for it to go onto Disney+. I'd be keen to know if you paid to watch it, if you went to the cinema, or you decided to rent or buy it early. Was it worth the money? Were you disappointed? What do you think of it in general? If you waited for it on Disney+, how did you find it? I think there's also a sing-along version on Disney+, but I don't think many of these songs are sing-alongable, which I don't think is a phrase. But I don't think a lot of them are that catchy. I wasn't bothered about singing along to any of them. So, who knows? Maybe the sing-along version will be popular. But for me, I can say that I doubt I'll ever watch this again. Maybe I'm wrong about that. We'll see. Time will tell. I'm glad I've finally seen it so I could come to my own conclusion. I don't think it's as bad as the average rating on IMDb. But at the end of the day, Snow White is not an amazing film. It's an average film. A couple of aspects are maybe slightly above average. It feels a little pointless, but if you're curious, then give it a watch. It's definitely watchable, and at the end of the day, while I expect more than watchable from Disney, It's an okay experience, and I'd say it's worth checking out if you're curious.